There's a growing frustration among some African Americans toward groups identifying as FBA, with critics saying the conversation has become more about tearing down than building up. The concern is simple. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines, but it's much harder to do the work that leads to real change. While debates continue online, others are taking their message to global stages like the United Nations. Here is Al Sharpton speaking about justice, accountability, and solutions that move communities forward. The question now is not just who is right, but who is building. Because progress doesn't come from criticism alone. It comes from action. Take a listen.
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that I'm going to be very personal in the sense that I came to the UN 30 some odd years ago with a great African leader. I was part of the delegation with Nelson Mandela when he addressed the General Assembly about sanctions in South Africa. I come many times since then, and I'm here today because I believe another great African leader, President Muhammad, is raising an issue that is very important and personal to us. As Attorney Crump has said, we have fought on many cases, and I'm doing a eulogy tomorrow, day after tomorrow, of a young man killed in Hartford, Connecticut. But all of these are just examples of a systemic problem that has not been dealt with. We can keep running from incident to incident, but if we do not deal with the underlying systematic problem, and that is that there are those that feel they have the right and the supremacy over other humans, and they will never be held accountable for it and never pay for it. This resolution is an attendance sheet on what nations stand for what. This is not a new call. I come out of the Martin Luther King School of Thought, but Malcolm X said we may have to go to the UN. One of his main disciples, Dr. James Smalls, is with us. Queen Mother Moore said this. Queen Mother Blakely's here. Sister, I don't come with others that have not. Sister Salam. These are people that have been in the streets for decades. And State Senator Sanders, all of us, but many of them preceding me. The question is not what the people feel. The people have stated their feelings and will continue to and must galvanize. The question is, what do nations stand for? When I hear nations saying they're going to abstain from a vote, how do you abstain from being a racist and a bigot? How do you abstain from paying your debt to people that you worked for centuries and never paid? How do you abstain from the guilt and the blood that's on your hands while you deposit money in banks that your forefathers didn't earn and our forefathers worked and never got paid? Your Excellency, I say it's personal because in 2007, a reporter came to me from a local tabloid, the Daily News, and said that they were doing something around Black History Month in America. And they wanted to do a trace of our family tree. I told him, fine with me. He said, I'll be back. He came back with another reporter. He said, do you know your great-grandfather? I said, no, I knew my grandfather on my father's side. I didn't know my great-grandfather. He said, well, we traced him. He said, do you know where he was from? I said, they were from Florida, my grandfather and my father. He said, no, they were from Edgefield, South Carolina. I said, no, I never knew that. He said, your great-grandfather was named Coleman Sharpton. and he was owned by a woman named Anna Thurman Sharpton. He said Anna Thurman Sharpton was the aunt to Strom Thurmond, a leading segregationist. He said the reason we found it is that when Alexander Sharpton died, his widow, Anna Thurman, sold her slaves to Florida, who was your great-grandfather. That's only 3 generations from me. We talk about this stuff like this is some bygone generation. My mother had to sit in the back of the bus and couldn't help me with homework when she came to Brooklyn, New York, had me. I never sat in the back of a bus, but I was raised by them that never got paid for what was done. We are sitting in the United Nations, but it is in the United States where they're right now deciding whether they will continue to allow us to vote properly. They're going to vote on whether or not we are going to have our right to voting, our right to redress. And if the United Nations sends a resounding message on President's resolution that we don't care about the debt owed, you are signaling those that are trying to trump the world that you can do whatever you want to do to us. So my challenge is, and the experts have given the great background and the preceding speakers have given the facts, but my appeal is that you will not define our humanity. You will define where you stand for humanity. When you vote for your nation, history will record that after the genocide perpetrated on people, after the worst form of abuse that we've seen in terms of the slave trade that is in this resolution, that if your nation would authorize you to either vote no or have laryngitis and act like you can't speak up at all, then you are co-signing this brutal form of slavery. There will be nobody that will duck being called on the carpet tomorrow. Either you stand for justice or you sit with the unrighteous. Either you stand... Either you stand for justice or you are part of the problem. Either you stand for those that want to be free or you're just as bad as the slave masters that held us bondage. Thank you.
If this breakdown gave you something to think about, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. And stay tuned for another episode of What is Going On Media, where we make the complicated clear.